Welcome to the hub of analytics education, preparing students for the future, millions of records at a time. The hub of analytics education is located in Boston, Massachusetts.
Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. We want to first of all thank Ganesh Krishnamurthy as well as Udi Hoitash for asking us to come here and present to you today. Since we started the Hub of Analytics Education in the August of 2016, Bill and I have and will execute over 24 national presentations as we look in this upcoming May, including the Georgia Association of Accounting Educators, the mid-year meetings for both management accounting as well as auditing, the ATA conference and a variety of other conferences upcoming, as well as other national conferences such as the Big Data Boot Camp that we've done, and gone to different universities such as UMass Lowell, Seattle University. We've got Marist College coming up, and a variety of other different presentations. So we appreciate Ganesh asking, well, you're doing this with everybody else in the world, could you help us out, or at least come here and do something for us? So we appreciate that, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak with our own accounting faculty here today. So in 2013, then group coordinator Tim Rupert asked me to teach the auditing course in the MSA program. And at that time, he asked if I could update the content and potentially incorporate some contemporary subjects, such as data analytics. So I tried some elementary ideas, including using a very simple idea workbook with using an academic license for idea that just principally focused on, principally focused on just how do you teach that tool. And what we've learned is the tool's unnecessary. I mean, the tool's necessary, but it's really, that shouldn't be the focal point of the courses that we teach. And so we started with it, but we learned a lot by doing this. And so in 2014, I ended up taking on some other duties within the college, even though they were short-lived, and came back to the classroom in 2015. Tim had secured some funding from PricewaterhouseCoopers at that time, PwC Inquires grant, and asked if I could expand some of these simple topics that I covered in 2013 and really try and do something with some funding from PricewaterhouseCoopers, $7,500, from a $25,000 grant. And so what we ultimately did is we tried to figure out how do we teach big data analytics. And what my biggest need was when I was doing this, but trust me, I struggled to try to figure out how to do this. The biggest need is, how do I teach big data analytics without a big data set? I need a transactional level data set from a company that'll help. I mean, we had small little data sets, 200, 1,000 records, and students, as I found, if I asked them to use a particular business intelligence tool, they would tend to go, yes, yes, yes. They do a lot of hand waving, and then they'd go into Excel and they'd scan through 1,000 transactions looking for the issue. And they really weren't going through any logic. They weren't thinking about how to do it. They figured out, because they're efficient economic agents, they figured out a more efficient way of doing it without having to go through the process of learning a new technology. Again, this wasn't about learning a technology, but now what happened is, they were using a different model or a different methodology to logically look for issues, and I really wanted them to use a different logic. I really wanted to think about different ways of approaching how to solve issues using the data. So I'll give you an example. A faculty member at a different university created a case, and he was very proud of it, and he was proud that all the students were using IDEA. And then I had one of his students in the MSA program this past summer, and I knew he had taking this particular faculty member. I said, so you're very familiar with IDEA? He goes, yeah, not really. I said, well, didn't you do this particular faculty member's case? We kind of hand-waved at IDEA. We really didn't use it. We just did everything in Excel, and we scanned through all the transactions and figured out where everything was. So I communicated this to the faculty member. He's like, oh my gosh, I thought they were all doing it in IDEA. I thought they were all, and again, this is just a business tool, business intelligence tool. I thought they were all doing it in IDEA. I said, well, there's workarounds to that, right? There's ways to force the student by giving them your individual script that uses the particular program to at least assure that they are using this. So students will always default to what they already know. And so if you give them a 1,000 record file, they're going to default to what they know. So and I've been asked this question at a variety of different conferences and a variety of different speaking engagements. Well, what's the difference between my 1,000 record data set and your 15 million record data set? And there isn't anything different as far as the quality of the data. It's just the size of the data, and the size of the data necessitates a different way of solving problems. And so that's the really big issue. It also scares the hell out of our students because they cannot default to what they already know. They have to do something that's different, and they have to force themselves to learn this kind of stuff. So we figured out how to create a large transactional data set. It's called Bibitor LLC. It is a large beer and wine retailer. The sales files have 12.5 to 13 million transactions. The purchase files have 2.4 million transactions, quarter million records in inventory. We've got payroll, we've got other expenses, we've got not capital leases, but operating leases accounted for under ASC 842. So it's a real company. We've created this whole company.
Did you simulate it?
What's that?
Did you simulate
it? It is a
data?
realistic fiction. So there is an organization that on a daily basis drops their ending inventory in a CSV file. I've been collecting these things since April of 2015. So every single day I have a new CSV file from this organization, which has only 7 variables. What is the store? What's the brand? What's the sales price? What's the city? What is the on-hand? There's a couple of other things on there, but really the only thing that I care about is the on-hand, the brand, and the city. Because then I can take these two data tables, day 1 and day 2, and I can match them up against brand and city and compare the on-hand. If the on-hand goes up, we bought something. If the on-hand went down, we sold something. So it doesn't encompass everything, but at least it's a realistic fiction to tell me what is the flow of transactions that happen on a day-to-day basis. So we created an R program that extracts all the meaning out of all of these ending inventory files. And right now we're up around 13 to 1,500 ending inventory files that we run through R and create all of this realistic fictional data, if you will. But again, we don't really care what the answer is. The answer is largely irrelevant, right? It's just there's stuff that people can get their hands on and start messing around with. So we created this data set. We've also created this company that goes with it, and we've also created 2 other companies that also go with it. So we've got a retailer. Well, we went up the supply chain and created a wholesale company. So instead of having 79 retail locations, now we have a wholesaler that sells to 79 retail locations. So the wholesaler is selling to all these 79 retail locations, and now you invoke not just the inventory issues, but now you also have accounts receivable. All right, so there's some other things that you can also talk about in these. And we also have supply chain routes. All right, so how are they going to get it from Worcester up to all of these different places in the New England area? So now you have supply chain routes, you've got different products, which products are selling in which particular stores, et cetera, et cetera. So we created all this data, and the data is what most faculty around the country, around the world, like. But we also have supporting information because it's important to also understand how the data came to be. So there's process manuals and process flowcharts that describe, in utilization of NetSuite, how, using a point-of-sale system, a Micros point-of-sale system, how that interacts with NetSuite, and then creates all of the financial records that ultimately show up in these data sets. So we try to go from what's the boundary condition of it, instituting a transaction, all the way to the general ledger, if you will. Now, it's a lot of data, there's a lot of stuff to try and figure out, and we are always struggling with what are the best ways to try to implement this, what are the kind of use cases that you can use in different courses. And we're always struggling with that, and because this is still early days, when we launched this back in September 16, we've only been really open for 26 months, so we're still constantly trying to have this thing evolve. Today we've tried to, and so this simple request from Tim ultimately led to the Hub of Analytics Education, because we decided instead of going to a publisher and trying to make money off of it, we said, listen, this we can't figure, education is too expensive as it is. What we need to do is we need to make this publicly available to all faculty around the globe, because this is something that needs to occur in our industry being accounting, and then we need to be those economic agents to make that happen in industry. And so our goal has always been to make all of the things that we do open educational resources. So everything that you see on the hub is freely available to educators to use for educational purposes and educational purposes only. And right now we have, I think it's getting close to 800 faculty in close to 400 different colleges and universities in 27 different countries that have accounts with the Hub of Analytics Education. And that's pretty good for only being open for 26 months. So, and with no marketing, no dollars, nothing, right? It's all based, it's a very organic growth process. And to us, it's a success story with very little. Now we have, and we'll talk a little bit about, we have corporate partners who we are very happy to have. PwC is obviously one of them. So to date, as far as course implementations are concerned, I've included in this MSA course, right? This was the starting point. The course called Auditing in a Big Data Environment, and we've also included in an undergraduate section, undergraduate Intro to Managerial Accounting course, as well as, you really started off in the cost accounting course, really doing it there, right?
So I was teaching 3416, which is Kim's cost accounting course. I shouldn't call it Kim's, but I do.
Calvin's too, right? Calvin's your course too, right?
Sorry, Calvin.
We don't want to leave you out, dude.
Sorry, this was before, this was back in the day. So I realized I was teaching 3416, and I was teaching material, and I didn't realize until I taught 2301, and I was really teaching much of the same elements. So when I realized I matched up the curriculum between 2301 and 3416, most of the topics were the same. There were some differences in manufacturing inventory and a few other elements, but I was really looking for a place to differentiate my instruction and give a value add. And then my teaching mode switched over and ended up in 2301, and I said, I can't do this in 2301, it's too hard. But then I went to a conference at Bentley, and they were talking about the traditional organization of a CPA.
Of a CPA. Yeah, CPA firm, right?
And
the triangle, right?
Larry knows about this well. So this is the triangle, where you have a bunch of interns and associates at the bottom, and you have very few partners at the top. And the problem is, where we're going because of outsourcing automation is to a much different shape. And our students are not going to be people who are going to do the low-level outsourcing work because they want to make more money than that. We're going to need some people who can automate, but the problem is we're not teaching them those skills because comp sci is better than us at this stage. And now, who are we going to teach to? And who's our clientele? And what we need better trained people in this blue section, because the partners and the senior managers want people basically coming in, trained in data, trained in logic, trained in process. So I said, okay, given this and given the outlook of this, where there's probably going to be fewer partners and fewer people at the top, and more of this people in that manager, senior manager middle, most likely manager, even maybe heavy associate, we have to change how we do things, or at least I do. So at that point in time, I put in the 2301, and it was hard. I had to change what I taught.
It still is hard.
It still is hard. There's no question about it. But based on this, I said it's a must. And I was nervous about doing it the first time. I had tech issues. I had issues with the students not understanding the data, not understanding the program. They said, why are we sometimes teaching the tool? And I said, I don't care what tool you use. We just need a way to get you to think about this process and what the data is actually doing for you. So this is what actually inspired me to put this in the 2301. Now, from that point, excuse me, I'm going to go back for a second. The question is, how do we do this? And the industry lacks human resources. And what's happening now is we need people with a different skill set. And so if you read McKinsey's white paper, PwC's white paper, they don't talk about, I want to be careful here because we go back and forth in some of our internal debates here, but I love the traditional accounting curriculum. I think it's great, I think it's a great foundation. But people are now starting to hire for skills rather than degrees. And so when we start thinking about what skills are our students coming out with, traditionally, we have trained them for the CPA exam and for these starting positions. If these starting positions go away, I am nervous about what we're training them in, because I don't think they have some of the skills from my conversations with industry folks that they need to be successful right off the ground. So what this has done is it's basically changed the nature of accounting education. And we have evidence from a lot of our competitors that they are changing the way they're teaching. We've seen it at Bentley, we've seen it at some of the UMass schools. They're developing entire programs around audit analytics, around accounting analytics, business analytics. And we go back and forth, and we agree on this, is we don't think that individual programs, I hope I'm not getting
No, go ahead.
Individual programs where you say, okay, you have a course in data analytics is inherently the best way to go, because students need that repetition. They need that infusion throughout the course, so that way it's not, okay, I have to take Charlie's auditing course, that's big data, 3 months in, we're done, boom, we're gonna forget about it. The idea would be that we can put this a little bit in every single course, or at least most courses, and that can actually enhance our curriculum throughout without having this different track, if you will.
I just want to add, I've done this one speech a couple of times as a keynote speaker at the AAA Northeast meeting, as well as the AIS educators meeting back in June down in Colorado. We liken what's happening now back to when we had the advent in the 60s of computers and technology. And what we ended up doing as the academy is we said, let's just create the AIS course. And that's what we did. And we didn't do any infusion of technology and computers in all the other courses. And so everyone went along their own way, teaching the courses they normally would teach. And then we have this AIS course. And we think about, who do we get to teach that? How do we, who's teaching that? What different methodologies are they using? It's very different. Some of the AIS people don't, can't get, are not necessarily doing research in some of the research areas that we do other things in. So, and also it's a difficult position to hire for, because there's always a scarcity of somebody who's going to be able to teach accounting information systems. Again, I'm getting this feedback from other faculty around the globe. And so I think we are in the same position that if we start creating big data analytics courses, standalone courses, we're going to have the same human resource issues of trying to find those people, have them teach big data analytics courses, and then they're always going to be pulled somewhere else because somebody else wants them. And everybody else is sitting here going, well, who's going to teach big data analytics now? Who's going to teach big data analytics? So it has to be, from our perspective, it has to be a shared responsibility, and we really focus on infusing into existing courses. We're not talking about changing everything. We're talking about putting in supplemental information, 1, 2, 3 opportunities in a class to just have a discussion about big data analytics, maybe play with a tool, maybe play with some data. We're not talking about completely turning this upside down, shaking everything out we've done now, and then rebuilding it. We're just saying, let's put some additional, instead of doing some textbook problems that might do similar things, let's do something with big data. And that's all we're really referring to. And initially, I think you'll get more comfortable with that, and you may want to put more opportunities in there. And you may only want to do it in one time in one course, find some success there, and then maybe find another question or opportunity to ask in the next section, the next time you do the course, and now you start building out your own course, your own expertise, and now you're starting to give them more exposure. But even just one exposure to these students is extraordinarily powerful, and we have a little bit of information to support that.
So the first time I did this, I was in 3460, as I mentioned, and I actually was doing HBS cases, which I love. I love HBS cases. I think they're wonderful. And I threw out to my students that I'm playing around this big data stuff. It's new to me. I don't really know what's going on. And it's true. I didn't. I just sat next to you. So, and for better or worse. And now I had a student, Matt Atherton, who said, oh, I'm really interested. I showed him a couple of Tableau dashboards, because when I give back my exams, I show everyone a scatter plot of all the scores with, descriptive statistics. And they said, oh, that's really great. I just came back from, I think it was TJX. I would love to learn more about this. So I basically said to my students, here's one case. If you want to do big data with me, we can do it together, or you can do HBS. And I had 2 students volunteer. Matt was one of them. Tiffany Arredondo, thank you, was the other one. And Matt was in a situation where he was a junior at the time, about to be senior, and he did this. He put this on his resume. He eventually helped me write the first sales case that I did. And he ended up applying out to Seattle because he always wanted to live out in Seattle. So he had no connections out there, and he went out to Alaska Airlines, and he said the only reason why they hired him was because he had this on his resume. I talked about this in a AAA webinar. Tableau picked it up, and Tableau actually interviewed him about his experience. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. So that's one success story. Another success story is good old Marco Pagoni. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
It's probably a question that belongs in the, how dumb can questions be? But I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
So, a couple of questions. So I'm trying to get some sense of how you define big data. How big does the data have to be in order for it to be considered big data?
So, can I jump in? And I don't know the answer to that question because everyone that I've read has different definitions. And McKinsey, the white paper I read, they don't actually define it. It's just that concept of that processing information and analyzing the information of what you have. So there's no set number. Some people do it based on terabytes or gigabytes. Other people do it on rows. And the idea is just, again, going back to that process. And that we can't just simply use our eyes to ocularly scan information, that we actually have to use some form of logic and processing and logic process to analyze the information that we have on hand.
Right, which raises sort of the second question in my mind, and I think you sort of alluded to this a couple of times, but the bigger question is, from your comments, it's maybe you are suggesting this and maybe you're not, but what gets me excited about this is that there is a paradigm shift in the way in which we need to think about educating our students. And maybe you're going to cover this at a later point in time. I'm trying to understand what that paradigm shift is, because I understand that, large data sets, I would imagine, have been around for quite a while. I mean, if you look at Walmart's data 15 years ago, it's probably the millions and millions of transactions every day they probably generated. But would that qualify as big data? How are they dealing with it? But I'm interested in your thoughts on, is this a paradigm shift? And I can give you one example of why it might be a paradigm shift in terms of how you think about training students. So for example, hypothesis testing, right? It's all based on the fact that you can't do something with the entire population. So you have to draw, hopefully random draws of it, and then draw conclusions based on that sample. With this new word, perhaps you can basically do the whole. I'm just trying to grab my hands
and that is the goal. We look at 100% of everything.
Right. So could you speak to, is this a paradigm shift in the way we need to be thinking about training and educating students? And if it is, could you clarify as to what that paradigm shift is?
Well, I mean, the paradigm shift is instead of teaching, instead of teaching rules and process, what we're teaching is hypothesis testing, right? Is what's the question that needs to be asked? What data do you have to answer that question? Not just samples of data, all of the data. What data do you have to answer that question? And then how are you going to effectively communicate it? That last piece is very, very important as far as how are we going to communicate that to a decision maker so that they can make the best decision possible, whether that's through a visualization or some other methodology. So the paradigm shift is instead of just teaching the nuts and bolts of accounting, it's moving to let's teach the scientific method of looking at all of this data and trying to make some sense out of it in our classes on a daily basis. Because that, from an audit perspective and even in a managerial accounting perspective, we, as the content experts, can provide them with what those questions are, right? Then it's a matter of us trying to train them on what's the best methodology to solve those questions, right? And try to figure out what answer lies within the data and how are we going to approach it and what tools should we potentially use to do that, right? So now they become investigators, and not just from an audit perspective, but for everything that we do. And so I don't know if that is your paradigm shift, but I think it's more subtle than a whole paradigm shift.
So if I
go ahead,
I'm a little bit more tempered, I think, in my opinion, than maybe Charlie is in general. But I think we're seeing is maybe a transition from I want to say the 80s when accountants did everything on paper to Excel. And I think that's the paradigm shift that we're going to see with more and more coders out there, with the availability of cloud information. You're going to see a lot more people who access the data that we historically have basically made our livings off of. They're going to start using SQL codes to basically organize that data. I have friends in the industry, and they just say, you know what, I don't bother with accounting information systems. I just go SQL, but I gather the information I want. And they program it themselves. And they tailor everything themselves. From an auditing perspective, you actually could have, in theory, whether it be blockchain or not, systems linked up to automatically match transactions. And that would be a tremendous, tremendous paradigm shift. And I think that's where we're headed. There's a professor at NYU who thinks that 97% of the information, 97% of the auditing work is going to go away in the next 5 to 10 years. And that is going to be a tremendous paradigm shift, whether it be through blockchain or other means.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful to me at least is perhaps do, again, maybe my level is lower than most others in terms of understanding some of these issues, is that, you know, perhaps provide a mapping of how we currently, let's say, teach a certain module or something of that nature. Maybe you're going there.
Yeah.
And how you, with the tools and the analysis and your sort of view of how that model should shift, what really is the contribution? I think because one of the things that I always worry about is whether we get, in any new technology, we focus too much on the tool, and because tools will change. Today you have Excel, tomorrow you have Tableau, the day after it'll be something else. And it isn't clear to me that that's, not that, you know, people are definitely going to benefit from learning all the latest tools, but it isn't clear that that's where our competitive advantage is. Our competitive advantage, I think, as academic institutions, on helping them become really critical thinkers for now and into the future. And that's where I'll stop my rant here.
Well, but going through the critical thinking is trying to figure out the logic to be able to solve the problem. Okay? Using actual data. That's where we force them to be critical thinkers, and we evaluate not outcomes. We evaluate their defense of how they solve the problem. That becomes the operative item for you as an educator to evaluate, not whether or not they got the right answer. So that middle piece, through their communication of how they did it, what was the research design, whatever you want to call it, that ends up becoming the thing we spend most, and that's where I spend most of my time, is looking at, is the logic on how they solve the problem, because I don't care what the answer is the logic on how they solve the problem reasonable, and what kind of comments can I give to them in the future so that their logic becomes stronger when they leave Northeastern. And I think you do the same thing as far as trying to give them some support on, you know, why did you think to put this variable with this variable to analyze this particular piece, this particular question?
And just take a little different spin, I think the questions are the theory, right? So, and I'm going to talk about this later on, I'll do a quick presentation with Tableau, but basically, you know, if I'm trying to do a sales analysis and keep this very simple, and I want to understand what's my highest margin product, and all my accounting students, I did this in MSA MBA workshop yesterday, or 2 days ago, they said, oh, I'm going to look at my gross margin, revenue, minus cost of goods sold, they're all good. The question is, when I asked them, how do you actually calculate that? And from the raw data, they couldn't do it. And for some, it was a lack of understanding of AIS in terms of creating relational databases. And for some, it was simply the calculation of quantity sold times purchase price. And I'm not even incorporating, you know, inventory obsolescence in there. But they just didn't know the procedural element of how to make that happen. So from a theoretical perspective, that is our strength. That's who we are, right? But then from that procedural level, in terms of that skills that they're going to take at the next step to make us competitive, I think that's where we have potential value to add to our students. So I don't know if that...
Does that help?
No, so I mean, I think
You want to talk about Marco?
Yeah, so let's quickly talk about Marco. Marco is a student of mine at 2301, and he actually had no experience in this as well, and he actually got so involved and so invested in this, he actually volunteered after this semester to work with me. So he ended up in a situation where he ended up writing, or helping me write, the cost value profit case that I wrote. And he also did a single verse multi-driver case for managerial accounting and helped me with with that as well. He is someone who ended up going to Wellington, and during his Wellington conversations, it was again all about this data analytics stuff they had done. And listen, eventually this is going to be throughout, so this won't stand out, but he was incredibly motivated, self-motivated. He then leveraged that Wellington co-op into a job at Morgan Stanley. And he's a finance major, concentration, had some experience in accounting, but again, it's that skill set that we're trying to focus on in terms of building.
So what do employers look for? Like you're saying, like all this success story, which is it's great for us.
Yeah.
But what exactly are they looking for? The technical skills, or
It's a combination,
Exposure.
right? It's exposure.
Exposure at this point, because
Okay.
there's so few competitors coming out of these institutions that have content knowledge, right? You can always get somebody who knows Tableau over at CCIS, but they don't have the content knowledge. So right now, what they're looking for is, okay, you understand content, and you have at least some exposure
to the skills.
to the skill set to at least be thinking about how I might solve these problems. I don't care whether or not you're an expert in Tableau or Click or IDEA, ACL, whatever, Watson Analytics. All I care is that you've had some exposure and it looks like you're motivated to keep getting exposed. That's what they're looking for now. Now, over time, that competitive advantage for these kids goes away as more and more institutions that surround us that are content experts within accounting, finance, et cetera, are starting to give their students these kinds of additional skill sets within the context.
Okay.
And based on survey results, it's tool flexibility. So again, and this goes back to Ganesh's point, not teaching the tools inherently of saying, okay, this is the end-all be-all tool. I think until people start learning Python, R, and having those underlying, coding skills, we're not going to do that. But the question is, do they feel comfortable to? What did you say?
We might.
We might. Yeah. Well, potentially.
Yeah.
But until people feel, and if they get exposure to it, like Charlie's saying, and they feel comfortable with different tools and willingness to learn these tools, I think that's what they're looking for at this point.
So you're suggesting like the way to do it is to diffuse it into different courses.
Yes.
How about creating a course that will teach the tools? And then people will come to all the different courses already knowing Tableau and I don't know, whatever, five tools that we decide people need to learn, and then just do cases or problems within those different courses.
So I think that's a great idea. I think the question would be, are people committed to infusing it into their courses beyond that single course? So like I took middle school Spanish. I had a tremendous course in it, great teacher. I can't speak a lick of Spanish, all right, just because I didn't use it afterwards. So I think the question is, if we end up in a situation where we have one course and we're not using it after that one course.
Well, I think you're lowering the bar, right, by saying, well, I don't require you in the managerial accounting to teach them Tableau or whatever, but have a case. Then you lower the bar actually for those teachers or professors, make their life easier than requiring me to teach Tableau and SAS or whatever tools that you're envisioning, as well as having a case. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, again, having conversations with all of the big four firms, they're seeing a lot of these standalone data analytics courses, and we're going to fall into the same problem that we're going to ultimately hit, that we have with the AIS courses now. I mean, I may be wrong, but AIS in its 20, 30-year history is kind of this course that what's going on in there. It varies depending on every single institution and depending on who's teaching it and how to get people.
I actually taught this.
I know you taught that, right?
And I taught databases actually, and this kind of SQL stuff and
But
along those lines.
if everybody else in the room, you're the only guy teaching this data analytics course, and everybody else in the room's going, I don't have to worry about it. Udi's got it. I don't have to learn this stuff.
I agree we need to infuse it to the courses, but what you're suggesting is infuse it both in the content as well as teaching them their skills, and that means that all the professors will actually need to know Tableau, SQL, or whatever you guys envision, and that's a higher bar.
It's a higher bar. It's a higher bar, but there are there's low-hanging fruit.
Could be, yeah.
In some of these other courses,
right,
that are not going to require you to understand Python, R, and some of these things. There are some opportunities to get your faculty familiar with it initially, right? We don't have to go to, we've got 5 tools, everybody has to learn those 5 tools in the next 2 years. That's not doable. But we can at least start in using baby steps, getting Jayon familiar with using NetSuite in his particular courses, or Brian, maybe he wants to use Tableau in his particular courses, and he says, I'm going to just try this, and maybe I get comfortable with it, and maybe I learn from Bill, and Bill's using something else, and I want to try something different, right? And so it becomes this long-term process of building out faculty expertise, increasing the overall human capital of this faculty, to be able to do implementation so that anybody could all of a sudden go, oh, Udi's on sabbatical, Patrick, can you teach the data analytics course if we have a separate data analytics course? And Patrick goes, absolutely, because I've had some exposure. Yes, in 5 years that could happen.
Gonna get tenure first, Charlie.
That's a good point, what you just said.
I understand.
There is a lot of friction in our profession for that, our young faculty, their first priority now is to get things.
No, I understand.
And they will not, unless they're forced, they will not take, and they shouldn't take the cost in order to learn Tableau, and that, because that's a lot, that's a big ask.
Can I make one suggestion along those
Yeah,
lines?
of course.
I think there are certain things, and I think when I show you Tableau, you're gonna realize it's pretty easy, but there are certain tools that are pretty easy and not that much of a cost to learn. Other things like Python, R, those are big costs, right? So those are situations where I didn't know R, I'm learning R, it's taking me months, it's still a pain for me, right? I'm still not that good at it, I'm getting better at it. But the point being that I have that time, and I'm not under 10 o'clock restriction.
Right.
So
the two things we want to show you today are things that are low-hanging fruit. All right,
Okay.
they're really easy implementation, or again, depending on how you want to do it. But there are two things that you can go, oh, I could do that right now. It's not that tough, because we're only talking about 1 or 2 instances in a 15-week course. We're not talking about taking every single day of your course and making it a Tableau element. We're talking about a couple of opportunities. And we're not even talking about trying to assess the students. I tend to take an executive education approach where I just want to expose them to it. I'm not going to test you on it. I just want to make sure that we take the theory and give you a practical application, and I don't care whether or not you can replicate it in the future, but you can at least now put on your resume that you've had some exposure to this. And early days, that's all we care about. This is early days, and that's okay. We can do that without having to go through an assessment process.
So what I did was I took for 2301, I took the 3 cases, and I basically just changed it over to be this one company, where I take them from sales to sales, cost by profit.
Are you going to show this?
I'll show
We'll show you the sales.
Yeah,
I can
show you the
show
other pieces too,
Yeah.
and then kind of then the budgeting pieces, and I'm working
Yeah, I mean,
on various
there's-
cases. That's next.
Yeah, we got money from Tableau to create these cases. We've gotten money from PwC to create this database. We are going to get more money from a variety of different organizations, from Oracle, from KPMG, PwC, Click, Tableau, et cetera, Caseware International, to keep on moving and keep on creating open educational resources. That's, as the not-for-profit, that's our goal.
So just moving on, we had. Oh, go
Can I
ahead.
ask you a generationally challenged question for a second? You guys are sort of up here, looking over this thing, and I think I'm following that. But the thing that's sort of nagging at me in that diagram you showed with that big blue in the middle.
That came from the ICPA, by the way.
MSCPA.
I'm a CPA, sorry.
That's a different discussion. Aren't they the ones that brought us to 150 hours? You're analyzing, massaging, recommending off this huge database, manipulating in all kinds of ways with the fancy stuff, all of which is great stuff. The piece that's generational for me is, how do I know the data's any damn good? And so what happened to this whole middle ground here where you put everybody out of work because there's no work to do? Or is that just, that's a given and we move on from there?
I can tell you, from a data analytics perspective, one of the tests
Bill's
that we
smiling, so it's not a bad question.
No, it's not bad. But one of the tests you do from an audit, because you're looking at it from an audit perspective, one of the tests you do from an audit perspective is you get all these data sets, you send them overseas, and they do a complete roll forward. You take last year's general ledger accounts, you put in all the debits and all the credits and make sure it rolls forward. That way you know all the data that you have is complete.
So that step still exists?
That step still exists.
It's been automated to a large
But
extent.
now it's completely automated, and it maps to every single account, and that test is done in India for every company other than maybe federal government, because they don't allow any of that offshoring, but that test is done at every company where they have access to their data. So that still happens, but it's all automated now. That's a strong completeness test. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, from an ethical standpoint, because I teach ethics too, is that that's an issue with big data, is that basically big data is capturing the past, and then the question is, if we codify or if we make algorithms out of that big data that's codified the past, are we building inherent biases? And that's something from an ethical standpoint that we can discuss. I don't think that's where you're going,
No, it's
but in
way
terms,
past me.
yeah, exactly. But from an ethical standpoint, that's something that we do talk about. But anyway, so these are success stories, and these are success stories from the employer's perspective as well as the individual students' perspectives. But what I did last summer, in summer one, I had 71 students in my 2301 course, and I gave them a survey, and I basically said, what do you think? And this is what they said. 98.6 valued this to their education. Now, granted, that's not everyone strongly believing. If you want to see the individual survey results, I have them up here for later on. But anyone who said, yes, this was better, so more likely, I said, yes, 98.6. So that's anyone from more likely to strongly agree. Important in managerial accounting, 87.3. Their perceptions of employers, 98.6. And then desire for more work, more advanced analytics, 91.5%. There's desire out there from our student body.
So I've told you a little bit, other universities are moving ahead with this. You know, we've done presentations. Bill did a presentation up at the University of Massachusetts Lowell to their entire faculty. And they are moving ahead. They're already implementing this even in intermediate accounting. Just trying to get students to have an understanding about how, again, exposure on how to use this stuff, how to solve these questions. I mean, there are individuals who have already started big data analytics courses within the undergraduate, as well as big data analytics master's programs in accounting, such as the KPMG MATA program. So they're all, I know we're at the early stages, but we can't get too far behind because we know Bentley is going great guns with this stuff. UMass Amherst, they have a strong MIS faculty, and they are, and I've heard this from partners who are hiring UMass students. He says, we love them UMass guys because we say, why are you taking accounting and MIS? And their faculty and their dean is saying, you have to take accounting and MIS together. They have to be done together. And so because of that combination versus the vast majority of our accounting students who are doing accounting and finance, they're getting those, even though they may not be fixing their accounting curriculum, they're at least getting some MIS exposure other than just the general 2301 MIS course, which is, from my understanding, is not the strongest course that we could be offering to all of our students. So there's some motivation here to do something. What it is we do is entirely up to the group to figure out what that ultimately looks like. So I mentioned that we have a variety of different universities that are users, or at least have signed up for accounts with the Hub of Analytics Education. As I mentioned, we have close to 800 different educators at over 400 different colleges and universities in 26, 27 different countries. And we even have faculty at Rutgers who have taken our data and worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers to create cases that are now on the PricewaterhouseCoopers site. Theo Stratopoulos at the University of Waterloo has created a book auditing for data analytics that's also published on our site. We've got Temple University is using it, University of Maryland, University of Texas at Dallas, University of Buffalo,
MATA programs.
And all the MATA programs. All the MATA programs use our data because we have a memorandum of understanding with KPMG that our data is put behind their firewall so the MATA programs can get direct access to our data and use KPMG's tools to do analysis using our data. So the universities are moving, and I think we've got to move too with them.
So just so you guys know, the MATA programs are basically programs in which KPMG is funding students to go to them for free.
Masters of Accounting and Data Analytics.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And I think it's, do you know where they are exactly?
Villanova is one of them.
Yeah, I think it's Villanova. I think
Villanova,
Isn't that like
Ohio State.
9 schools. It
Yeah.
actually started with Ohio State and Villanova
Villanova.
as their anchor schools. Now it's USC,
Mhm.
Arizona State, Virginia Tech. I'm missing a few.
Yeah,
We've actually been.
I don't know that anyone will argue with you that we need to do. Like, I think you make a very strong case. And apologies for being blunt, but can you show us something that?
Do you want me to fast forward?
I apologize, but show us what we can actually.
So let's go ahead.
All right, let's go to, so what we want to do here,
You want to get this?
yeah, no, yeah, we'll, yeah, so we give to, yeah, go ahead. Let's get out of this and do it.
You want to go NetSuite?
Yeah, we're gonna go to NetSuite. So,
we're going to show you two things. One is NetSuite, and the other one's going to be Tableau. So as Charlie's loading NetSuite, if it's okay if I speak, then basically NetSuite is an online ERP system, so it's cloud-based. And this is one of the primary cloud-based systems out there in the workforce, if you will. And we have and Charlie negotiated this where we put our data out there for free. And if you want access to it, basically let Charlie know, he can get you an account and he can basically help you get set up. That's fair to say.
that's very fair to say. We already have, Northeastern already has an account with NetSuite. So all it will take is for you as a faculty member to say, I want an account, and I've got X number of students, and they will set up an account for each one of your students so they can get access to the Bibitor data that's sitting in NetSuite, right? And so right here, I'm signed in as a faculty. I also have administrator rights as well as a student portal. And this is simple stuff, right? So I like to look at this as an intro to financial accounting and potentially intro to managerial accounting. So all this is just an accounting system and a variety of other things. And to think about intro to financial accounting, well, let's see if we can take a look at the financial reports for Bibitor, right? So we can go to financial, we can type in what report we want to look at, we can go to reports. There's a variety of different ways to get that. So we're going to go to financial.
Chuck, can I interrupt for just
Yeah, go ahead.
For the totally uninitiated like myself,
Yes.
what is NetSuite?
NetSuite is a cloud enterprise resource planning tool. So it'd be very, very similar to SAP on the ground or different kinds of accounting systems that also have a CRM or a customer relationship management.
It's the Oracle's ERP version is the NetSuite?
That's right. That's their cloud. That's their cloud version.
They bought them last year. They acquired NetSuite.
Oh, okay. Because earlier Oracle's ERP system was
I forget what
not.
it was.
That's not.
Yeah, it was an acquisition. I think last year. I can't remember the exact totals, but it was pretty sizable.
Yeah. So, sorry about that.
So that happened last year?
It happened. Yeah. So it happened in the fall of 2016. That's when they did the acquisition. So we had signed on with them. We were getting ready to upload all the data, and then Oracle bought them. We're like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I gotta go find a new ERP. And so I didn't have to, fortunately. But we are working with Infor, which is another cloud ERP that wants to put some of our data up as well.
It's for smaller companies, no? NetSuite, it's smaller than SAP. SAP is for more.
Well, SAP is going to be an installation, whereas this stuff can just be done on the cloud. And they're trying to build out to be able to have bigger companies be able to use it. But this company, the company we created, they've told us this is close to one of their medium to large sized organizations.
Okay.
You gotta be kidding me. Really? We're that big? So it gives you some perspective. So let's just take a look at some financial reports. And this is, I basically stripped this down to be what you would normally see when you first go on there. So let's go to reports. I want to look at the income statement for Bibitor, right? And so we tell our students to do this. And the first thing that comes up is there's no data available. What's going on? Well, the data that's available for Bibitor is the June 30, 2016. So now they've got to go and make sure that they're setting the proper period. So what we want to do is we want to go in and we want to look at a specific period of time here, and we want to get July 1st, 2015 to June 2016. So let's get there, July 15 to June 2016.
Charlie, this course you envision in financial accounting?
Yes, I think you can, again, as an example, right? So I think you can give this to students in financial accounting just to get them familiar with financial statements, right? Because one of the good things about this is now I can take these financial statements and now I can start drilling down and seeing all the transactions that roll up into this thing,
Right.
including all the debits and credits, right? And I can also then look at the process flows and the process flow charts and the process manuals that describe how all these transactions come to be, right? And the transactions are reproducible. They happen all the time the same way each time. So once you learn one transaction, you learn them all. So here's the income statement. I can go in and I can do the same thing and pull up the balance sheet, right? I did load, because I wanted to make smaller, I did load, but you can go in here and load an individual financial statement. So for example, or for an individual retail company. So for example, maybe I only want to look at one store. So I only want to look at, say, store number 3. So I can go in here and just look at the income statement for store 3. Or maybe I pull up a couple of stores and do some comparisons of a variety of stores and start asking questions to the students. Well, which store is doing better? Why are they doing better? Right? And in this particular case, wow, the income statement's much smaller. It only has sales, cost of sales, salaries and wages, but what happened to all those other expenses? Now we can start thinking, well, maybe these are profit centers, and maybe we've also got some cost centers that we also should be considering. And now I've just selected two different retail stores. I've selected the cost center as well as the profit center, and it just gives me the total. So now I see all those expenses show up. But now here in the column, what I want to do is I want to separate it by retail store. So now what I can see is I can start pulling up the retail stores, and I can also pull up the cost center. And now I can say, well, all right, there's a lot of retail stores. There's 79 retail stores. How are they allocating all of these cost centers, the kind of the corporate office expenses, to all of these individual profit centers? And now we've got some opportunities to discuss with our clients. Well, how would you do our students? How would you do that? What would be the drivers of some of these things? So now we're moving a little bit from financial into managerial accounting, right? We can even look at it, instead of looking at it by retail store. I'm just going to click off store 00 here and just go to store 3 again. Just by looking at store 3, instead of looking at it by retail store, I might be able to look at it by class of transactions. So I can look at it, instead of retail store, look at it by class, and we have 2 different classes of transactions that happen in this place. One is spirits, and one is wine. So now I can say, okay, well, what's the contribution margin of wine versus spirits for these different companies, right? Again, more opportunities to take a look at this stuff. Well, what if I wanted to, drill down a little bit? Well, let me take a look at sales and click on sales and start bringing up the sales. Now, this is going to take a little while because it's a detailed report, but you can always have these things click on here and say, alert me when ready. Fortunately, this is a small store, so it won't take that long to bring up all the detail. But fortunately, just like any cooking show, I already set up some scheduled reports before. Sorry. Get to my cooking show. Get back to my scheduled reports, report results. And I already have the income statement detail store number 3 already put up, right? So now I'll bring this up, it's already been done, and now I've got all of the individual transactions that occurred during the year for this particular store. And now I can look and say, well, let me take a look at one of these transactions. What would be interesting? Oh, how about this one for $275? It looks like it is document 8356. Let's drill down to that and learn a little bit more and have the students say, well, what's going on with this transaction? How are they booking this particular transaction? Let's give it a second to run.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I wanted to incorporate this in auditing, like for example, you could do this for like substantive analytical procedures for
Correct.
revenue by store location.
That's
right?
correct.
how do you compare year to year?
So we only have 1 year worth of data in here.
Okay.
At this point in time, we only have the 1 year.
Okay.
We have 3 years worth of CSV files
Good.
on the Hub of Analytics Education,
Okay.
right? So you would have to use a different tool to be able to do that. But we create 12-month year-end data files on every quarter. So we've got June 2016 as our first data file, then we get September 16, 12 months ended, December 16, all the way through September 2018.
Nice.
Right, so we also have that for BCGG, which is the wholesale company, right? And then we're about to come out with our third company, BA Toys, which is a retail toy company, because we had universities and colleges that had a more religious bent that didn't feel comfortable with discussing SIM products with their classrooms. So we try to be responsive to those particular. So now I can look and say, okay, well, who's my customer? Micros POS. What is that? Now you can have a conversation with the students by going back to the process flow chart and say, the Micros POS is the point of sale system that interfaces with NetSuite on a daily basis and drops all the transactions on a daily basis, not by customer, but by batch every single day. And now you have a more systems understanding and an intro to financial accounting course about how this thing's all working.
I think this is awesome, really. Like just the fact that they have NetSuite experience, because I know many companies have actually you just put NetSuite on your CV, it also gives you a leg up. So I think that is really great. The thing that I'm worried about is that you guys have this excellent tool, and I think the implementation from faculty, to be honest, knowing all the constraint, that is your bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that maybe if you solve this, that's what we get. So here's one idea that maybe we can implement. Maybe we can have like a designated instructor just for this type of thing, okay? For example, Bill, okay?
Well, no. This is it's an unbelievable idea and it's an excellent idea, but it requires some commitment on the dean's office to be able to do that.
Right. So deans and our department, okay? So let's say Bill, for example, okay? Not Bill, somebody else, doesn't matter. That will come. You know, I'm teaching managerial accounting, and we have like 12 section. I don't really know, I'm not going to go to NetSuite, I don't understand that, but if Bill comes, okay, and teach this section for me and give my student an exercise, and he does it, across 12 section, and this is his teaching load for one course or whatever, then that would be amazing because my student get experience, I'm learning as he does that, okay, so maybe it will take me like a couple of time to do that, and here you solve the bottleneck. So I don't know if that was. I never heard that.
We don't need Bill.
My wife came up with this. My wife came up with this idea.
Well, we don't have this kind of a relationship.
No, my wife said, why don't you just have a faculty member who's the designated big data person, because then they go in and do it with the students and train the faculty at the same time, because then the faculty go, oh, this isn't that hard, I can do this too.
I think that's the only way that's.
I agree, and it also solves the issue with part-time faculty who are here, teaching 1 or 2 classes. They're not committed. They're not 100% committed. But then Bill can go in and help them, and then they also get trained on how to do it in the future, and it also increases their overall people.
I think eventually the goal is that the faculty himself himself will actually do it because they see it. Through, a couple of years. And then they don't need really this designated, and then you can develop it in a different course and stuff like that. But I think this is something, because I think it's a huge benefit for a student. I don't see any of our faculty jumping on that and introduce. That's the reality of things. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So people can say another story, but in reality, I don't see anyone going and starting learn NetSuite on top of everything else that they need to do. But I don't know that the faculty will say, I don't want somebody to come to my class and give my students this experience, especially if they tailor it into my managerial accounting course or my financial accounting course. I think this is something that we should entertain. I don't know, I'm looking at you because you are a leader, but I think there is a value in introducing something like definitely into our course.
I would absolutely want Bill to come in and do some NetSuite and some Tableau for my students in auditing and in intro to financial. I would be 100%.
Not me? You don't want me to?
Oh, I figured you're the head honcho, so.
Well, no, but I'm the auditing guy.
True,
Right?
so whomever, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Whoever's appropriate.
Listen, you have two individuals, right? There's probably 40 or 50 people in the entire country that are immersed in this stuff right now from an education standpoint. You've got two of them at your disposal, right? How do you want to use us? That's your decision ultimately. Because we stand ready. We stand ready to help any university. Right? I mean, we're going all over the place, right? And we're happy to do it. So use us, right? To the extent that it's a reasonable load, obviously. So.
Yeah. Can I send you guys that case that I was talking to you about?
They tell me, yeah, I mean, it takes 2 seconds.
Okay. Cool.
And the other thing we're also trying to do is, we've got faculty who are submitting cases to us. We're trying to get more cases and exercises that are turnkey from other faculty around the globe, so that we can then put that on our site, make it openly available. We put in an editorial process so that it has a degree of rigor associated. We have a managing editor who is curating these materials with the objective of publishing this on our site so that other faculty can have access to it, right? Because there are faculty out there, while they want to do something with education, they also have the issue of being qualified within their university. So we're trying to put together systems and processes within the not-for-profit to provide that level of perceived scrutiny around evaluation of curated items that ultimately get used freely for all faculty around the globe.
Yeah.
So again, there are other things you can do with this, because the other thing we also have on the Hub site is, for all of these retail stores, we have square footage by store, right? You can figure out how many bottles there are, right? We also have it broken out by county. So now you can look at each county and go, okay, well, I have a population distribution in this particular county. Well, what's my bottle sales per person in that county? And why is this county underperforming other counties? What are some of the things that we could potentially do? These are all using financial accounting information to make good business decisions. You can call it managerial, you can call it financial. It's just using financial information to make good business decisions. So there's lots of information out there.
Do you also have them by state, presumably?
What's that?
Do you also have the stores by state?
Yes, well, in this particular company, it's a single state. So this is all sitting in the state of Lincoln.
We had to mask the actual location.
Yeah, we had
I'm only thinking applications, and I don't know that anybody else in this room would care. But if you had those by state and they were different states,
so
you got different tax courses.
So BCGG and BA Toys, the other two companies, BCGG is in 4 different states. BA Toys is in 12 different states, from Maryland all the way up to Maine and as far west as Pennsylvania, with an online store that sells as far away as California. So those 2 states, I'm working with Michele Morrow over at Suffolk University to create a tax use case that we'll present at the ATA meeting in February.
Yeah, because you could now have a state tax case, you could have a consolidated return case out of this, and if you really want to get detailed and boring, you could do sales taxes out of it too.
So,
Talk a little bit about Tableau.
yeah, so one thing you can do, which NetSuite, if NetSuite doesn't aggregate the information that you want, or it's just not good for presentation purposes, Tableau specializes in data visualization. That's its goal. It's a great tool, it processes information, it's wonderful. I have a quote from a former student, I'll give you that piece of paper later on, but basically she was trained at PwC, and she used Tableau, she's the only one who knew how to do it, and she ended up saving hundreds of hours worth of just manpower, of just simply ticking time, gone. So what Tableau does, it's very good at loading different data sets. So I've preloaded some things already. I took the sales file already, which is it's about 12.5 million records approximately. Yeah. So if you do this in your class, it can be a little awkward because you have to sit there for 3 or 4 minutes while the thing loads for the first time. So what I do is I have all my students download Tableau, it's free. I have all the students download the data at home. I come to class and I say, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna load the data, and during that awkward time, I explain what's going on. So in my class, what I do is actually hand out the data definitions, and I say, okay, today what we're gonna do is deal with the sales file, we're gonna do with the purchase price file. And the deal is, if those 2 files have a common unique variable, e.g. a primary key, I can put them together very easily. And I actually, in my class, I actually use the example of Social Security number. You have one file at the university, Your tuition file, that's social security number on. You have another file with housing, social security number, those match up perfectly. I can take those two pieces of paper and link them up. Now all of a sudden we have a relational database. Done. By the time I get through that spiel, we have this. At this point in time, I say, okay, let's learn about this business. Some very basic pieces of information we want to learn. And historically in managerial accounting, I've always kind of just done this hand-waving sales. But everything we do is based on sales. So why are we kind of hand-waving? So what Tableau will do is it will actually automatically try to read your data between dimensions and measures. Dimensions being categorical variables, measures being quantitative. It does its best to read it properly. Occasionally you have to change them because it doesn't read it properly. So if you want to just change it, all you have to do is just drag and drop if you want to. That's easy. It's cake. Okay? If you know Excel, it's easier because you're used to kind of that logic and that processing. You had a stats class, it's easier, most of your students have. So at this point in time, I say, okay, what's going on with sales? So I just go ahead, I drag in sales dollars, and all of a sudden I say, all right, we have $454 million of sales. How many transactions is that? So I go up to worksheet, show summary, and it gives me my descriptive stats over there. If I want to get it by store, make sure I grab this. Now all of a sudden I have my stores. Not very conducive for a presentation, so let me first flip my axes. Let me go ahead and sort this data. And now all of a sudden I say, okay, I have 79 retail stores, 454 million, it's not changed, but now my average store is selling $5.6 million per year. Minimum is 9,305, what's going on there? Maximum the median. Now there's conversation about why is the average shifting to the median? What's going on through distribution? If you want to drill in and say, well, okay, here we have 5 stores. What's going on with those top 5 stores? It'll automatically update for you. Yeah.
So, I'm trying to take in a lot of this discussion, which I think is very informative to me, for sure, and especially from the standpoint of taking all this and saying, you know, where do we go from here? I know we don't solve all the problems in the next 15 minutes, but
Sure.
yeah, it may take 17 minutes, but we'll go. So I see sort of 3 pieces to it, and see if I'm trying to capture this. I'm missing something here. So there is a tools component here, right? The NetSuite, the Tableau, and all of these. Very important, no question. Sometimes steep learning curve on that. For sure, people like me would have a steep learning curve. Then there's 2 other pieces that you want, in my view, I would like my students to be able to get, is using these tools and the kinds of data sets that you have. I'm hoping that my students will gain 2 things in the course or the curriculum. One is being able to understand or have the ability to perform analytics. In other words, what do you do with this data to make meaningful decisions, for example, right? And the second aspect is domain-specific expertise. So if you're doing managerial accounting, you learn about how managerial decisions using data analytics can then be employed. So, and then in auditing and so forth and so on. So the first piece, certainly the part about the tools part, is a problem. We have to find a way in which not only students, but more importantly, perhaps faculty, need to have the ability to get up to speed. You alluded to cases before, right? So the way I'm seeing this is that you have a way in which you can get faculty and students to learn maybe the rudimentary aspects of these tools, and then every course you have a case, a la an issues in accounting education case or a Harvard business case or so forth, where they essentially go use the data that you have, the big data sets that you have, and put them in the context of managerial decisions or financial reporting decisions or an auditing case and so forth. That then provides them a way in which they can apply how to do analytics in the context of the domain-specific area that they're learning. Is that the model that you have here?
Yes,
or
so we
what
have,
is-
we have actual cases on the hub that we publish and curate and put out there for use. So there are 9 different audit cases.
When you say cases, they have, there's.
They're simple. What's the question? You know, the question is, does price times quantity equal total sales dollars? Audit that. It's just, I've disaggregated it such that we're dealing with individual tests and creating work papers around those tests. Does inventory roll? Identify obsolete inventory. You know, figure out, are there lower of cost or market issues in inventory, et cetera, et cetera. So there's look for stores that have low gross profit as far as risk profiling your stores to maybe do some, or look for turnover ratios that are slow in some stores. Maybe that's where we spend more of our time doing an inventory observation. So that's the kind of cases that we're talking about. We're not talking about an HBS case or an issues in accounting education case. These are little exercises and cases that we've created that at least are little primers to get you to, well, let's try this and see if it works, right? They're not very elaborate. I think I would consider them fairly simple. And we've had,
Yours is a little bit different than that.
Yeah, mine's a little bit more simple because I'm looking at it from the perspective of getting students to think about what kinds of tests they need to execute given the risk profile of the particular client, right? Versus here's a case with a big write-up and all this other kind of stuff.
So I do it a little bit differently. So for my management accounting, there's 2 up there, but actually I'm sitting on a couple others. But with mine, I basically structure it so that way they have things to start out with, like little tasks where I give them, say, here, recreate this dashboard. Get them used to the tool, and then once they get used to the tool, then we can explore the traditional issues that you would see in a managerial accounting course. The thing that I like about it is twofold. One is it's an experiential learning opportunity for our students in the classroom. And 2, what it does is it enables those top students to explore different areas that typically in the HBS cases, which again I love, I think they're wonderful, but there's a ceiling to those because there's limited data. So for example, when you mentioned, and I apologize, I don't think I have the right data set up here, but when you mentioned, okay, let's explore something, well, this data set actually has some seasonality in there, and if we were to drill down by day, there's actually one particular day in September where we see a big spike in sales. So now if you're doing audit analytics, you say, wait a second, people drink the most around Christmas time, Thanksgiving, and the summertime. Why do we have a day, Saturday or Sunday in September that this thing is spiking? And now you give them that experiential learning opportunity in your classroom, and they start to understand risk.
And that happens to be a NASCAR race that was happening on that day.
Yeah, exactly. People like to drink during NASCAR races. But the point being that I think that's the model that we envision from that perspective in terms of changing the classroom.
Right. I think that's really helpful because I think I'm starting to put some structure around so then we go back to this question about how best do we, let's say, think about a model to implement it. Then why doesn't it make sense for us to then have a class, a module, I don't know to teach them the tools, and then would they just be able to pick up the cases and say, this is a case in, let's say, understanding, auditing sales, and then you have your case, and since they already have some sense of how to work this in NetSuite and in Tableau, they pick it up and they run, and then they put together a report based on the questions that you have in the case.
I think, can I
go ahead, please.
Thank you. All right, so I think the risk you have there, and I know for me in my classroom, I would be very nervous if I assigned something I didn't know how to do it myself, unless that person was coming into my classroom to then help me teach that. Like Udi's saying, like if Udi comes in and teaches me SAS, or teaching my class SAS, I'm like, okay, thank God, because Udi's here and he can answer those questions. But if I give them a SAS assignment and I don't actually know how to code SAS myself, now I get nervous because I'm not gonna look that good. So that's a concern that I have about if we have a course and then people actually try to implement this and they don't really know what they're doing.
And also you have deteriorating knowledge about learning in a tool course, in a tool class, if you will, an entire semester. And then I go on co-op, and then 6 months later I take his course. I'm like, oh oh yeah, I think I use Tableau. I don't really remember how to use it. Now they have to relearn Tableau, or they have to relearn R, or they have to relearn whatever it is. So if you at least you're providing support, the faculty member is providing support without having to have a complete course that all it does is teach tools. Right? Now now you at least have Bill saying, well, I know the tool, and I don't have to be an expert in it, but I know enough to be able to do this particular case.
That could be an online model, right? So you can have like those little YouTube movies.
Right.
Here is the blue. You know, you have like five minutes movies.
Or
and-
Render.com.
Yeah,
Render.com has got a lot of
Render, but
training,
and we have
something like that.
something like, and then you don't.
and we have
Yeah.
go back to our site if you don't mind. Just click on thank you.
Well, there's another aspect to it. I mean, the students are actually much better at this stuff than
Right.
we are.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
So once they get, I mean, there is learning taking place for them as well. So
Yeah.
if they're doing it
And
in financial,
and let 'em play.
and then by the time they get to managerial, you know, they're more comfortable with this tool.
So
And-
just for your edification, just for your information, the Hub of Analytics Education also has a YouTube site, all right, which has
Just got 100
videos.
viewers, right?
What's that?
Then you just get 100.
We got 100 subscribers.
There you
We
go.
finally got our 100 subscribers. Now we have our own URL.
Hell yeah.
We were so excited about that. But we've got YouTube videos that, where the hell is the cursor? I can't move up.
The hub band.
Right? So Idea,
Ooh, there you go.
Oracle NetSuite, Tableau, ACL, and we're constantly adding, and all these do are simple things. How do you import the data? How do you calculate a new variable? How do you create a dashboard? How do you create a financial report in NetSuite? All of that's there for you and for all your students. It's all there using Hub data.
And I will say that I personally, I love it when students teach me something. So when they play around with this, and then I have students who teach me stuff all the time, I'm like, thank you for teaching that. I had no idea how to do that. And
So, but you don't think it's at a point where they can
oh, they can.
basically go from there and self-learn
can.
on some of
They
the
can.
things, including faculty?
You just have to have the courage to say, I'm learning this too, let's play together.
Right.
And that takes a great deal of courage to get up there and not be the sage on the stage.
And Ganesh, from a tools perspective, Tableau does have a great online community. We're also doing some work with Click, which I don't have as much exposure to, so I don't want to talk to Click. But Power BI and Tableau are the two leaders for the Gartner's Magic Quadrant for visualization software. Power BI doesn't, to my understanding, doesn't work with Apple, which is why we're not pushing Power BI.
So here are a lot of links to Tableau resources, including their educational products, etc. So if you want to go in, again, this is a link on the Hub of Analytics Education under support. It's there. We also have it for Idea. We also have it for Click. So again, we're trying to make this a place where anybody can go and learn as much as they possibly can. It's just a matter of going in there and playing and finding things. The YouTube site's not that hard to find. The support materials from Tableau. I mean, we have very strong relationships with all these tool providers. They want to keep this thing going, including a joint business relationship with PricewaterhouseCoopers, an MOU with KPMG, an MOU with Click, a relationship with Oracle NetSuite, and a relationship with Tableau. So all of these organizations are committed to keeping this silly little website going, to be able to keep moving and pushing out data analytics education materials free of charge to faculty around the globe.
Questions?
Was this helpful?
This was awesome.
That's great.
And folks, if there's anything I can do, I mean, Charlie knows Idea better than I do, but if I can help with Tableau, feel free to.
Yeah, so the tools that we focus on are obviously NetSuite, Idea, which is an audit level tool, ACL, which is another audit level tool, audit command language tool. Both those companies are located up in British Columbia, Canada. We also have Tableau, and we're working on developing cases and exercises for ClickSense and Watson Analytics. We're a ways away on both of those.
Yeah, that's right.
But, and at the same time, we're creating more variables for tax. We're creating a brand new data set for a Vanguard family of funds that have a trade blotter for buys and sells equities as well as derivatives and fixed income instruments, so that finance faculty could then potentially use that trade blotter to evaluate what's going on in a particular portfolio versus another. And who knows what other crazy ideas we'll ultimately come up with.
So, I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I'm handing out, or just coming around, just a piece of paper that gave you the survey questions I asked and the actual results on a likely scale of 1 to 7. And then on the back side, here are just some ideas of things that you could do in your course. It's not the end-all be-all. You are the subject matter experts. You know your course is better than we do. So if you have any ideas, feel free to let us know, because we'd love to hear them. But again, if there's anything, here are just a few ideas. So if there's any suggestions or anything like that, we're always open.
And this paper that Bill handed out, this is for the sales analysis case that he was referring to. This is step by step, click by click, point by point. How do I do, where do I go next to upload the data, to do this, to do that, for that sales analysis case. Stephanie Tate at the University of Massachusetts Lowell gave this to her students, said, go do this. They went and did it, and then she took it away from them and said, okay, now go do it again, right? And again, because she's just trying to experiment. She doesn't know how to use Tableau, but she's just using these little teaching tools. And we have 3 or 4 of these for audit cases using ACL. We're creating them for IDEA, but 3 or 4 audit cases. Now, and by the way, Tableau is freely available to all faculty and your students. We have 200 ACL licenses, full licenses, on campus for use for all of our students. We also have 60 licenses, they're rotating licenses, so based on how many people are logged on, a maximum of 60 people can have them out. We have 60 licenses that are loaded on the school server for IDEA, right? So it's a matter of just being able to get access to IDEA. And we talk about use cases, Ganesh. We just created a data set for Jim Boyer, so that Jim Boyer, in his forensic accounting class, we took one of our data sets, BCGG, and we infused fraudulent transactions in it. And now Jim asked us to create invoices and sales orders so that there's some support material for these fraudulent invoices. And now Jim is in the process, he just launched it yesterday, he's in the process of teaching his students, many of them who had the big data course in the summer, how to use IDEA to find fraud in that data set. So we're always looking for other ideas because we can program it. We know how to use, I know how to use R, and I know how to create data. And it's not that hard. It's just a matter of parameterizing what kind of data you want, what kind of variables you want, and we can create it. Because that's how we created all this stuff. It's just R code out the wazoo. And I didn't know anything about R until December of 2015. So it's in the 3-year period. I'm pretty good at it.
Okay.
Why are not SAS?
Why R? Because I talked to Chris Rydell. I said, Chris, this is the problem that I have. What would you recommend as far as the tool is concerned? He says, you should use R. It's open source, and it's powerful, and it's dealing with matrices of data, and you've got to bang together huge matrices of data. And so I looked to our big data resource, Chris Rydell, to give me what he thought, in his professional opinion, was the right answer, and I totally agree with him.
Rudy, just so you know, a lot of these end-user tools, like Tableau, it's a private company, so they will incorporate Python or R, but they won't incorporate SAS because of the private group.
Okay.
So that's why.
Yeah, so IDEA has an R component, ACL has an R component, Tableau has an R component already built
Like an
into it.
API with the
Yeah, and I'll also tell you, we didn't get a chance to do this, and I've got 1 minute. NetSuite, a lot of the reports that you create in NetSuite, you can export to a CSV, a Word document, PDF, Excel, or a Tableau workbook. So you can create a consolidated report, maybe on the stock ledger report, and then output that and start taking a look and doing some calculations as far as turnover ratio is concerned, because you can see what was the beginning balance, what was all the buys, what was all the sells, and what do I have for ending. And that can all go to Tableau, and now you can do some visualization in Tableau because it'll output it to a Tableau workbook with all the data in it. So we're trying, and the other last thing on this, we've also set up, and we're still working on the mapping, we've also set it up that NetSuite data the data can be directly exported through an online database connectivity, ODBC, into any of these business intelligence tools instead of messing around with flat files, right? Instead of messing around with CSVs, you can take the data and directly open it from IDEA, ACL, or Tableau. So we're trying to get to the point where we're thinking about what's the state of the art, not today, because the state of the art today is using flat files. We're trying to think about the state of the art 5 years from now, and I'm thinking about from an audit perspective, obviously.
Any other questions?
Jenny wants to go, I'm sorry.
No, I'm trying to wait.
Thank you all for showing up. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Hub of Analytics Education video series. The Hub of Analytics Education provides open educational resources to educators around the globe, supporting both higher education and secondary education. For more information, please visit our website at hubae.org.